Chapter 1. Breathless, barely holding it together. The hall smells like old money and fresh judgment. I know that smell. I grew up drowning in it. 500 people packed inside the grand Ashmoor ceremonial hall, and not one of them looks at me. Not directly. That is the art of it. The whispers travel sideways. The glances land just past my shoulder. The cruelty here is architectural. It is built into the way they position their bodies, the way a group closes just slightly when I walk near, the way laughter rises a half second after I pass. I have learned not to flinch. Flinching gives them something. The mating ritual of the Halcyon Packs is not supposed to feel like this. The elders call it sacred, a celebration of bonds, bloodlines, and future. They light the amber columns and fill the air with ceremonial bloom oils and play string arrangements that cost more than my family's entire remaining estate. They dress the omegas in ivory and pale gold and tell us we are being honored. Being displayed is not the same as being honored. But I stopped arguing that point years ago. I sit at the far left edge of the Omega seating row, which is really just a long, curved bench positioned like a stage. Every alpha in the room can see us clearly. That is the point. We are the offering. They are the selection. The ritual pretends otherwise, but the math is simple. Around me, Omegas are being approached, scented, evaluated. I watch Caius Wren get claimed within 8 minutes of the doors opening. He laughs, surprised and pleased, and the alpha beside him looks satisfied in that particular way that says he already knew what he wanted before he walked in. 3 seats down, Ellery Voss gets a formal approach from 2 alphas simultaneously and has to choose. The elders murmur approvingly. No one approaches me. No one has ever approached me at one of these. Hi, viewers. Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt completely invisible? Not because you did nothing wrong, but because someone decided your story before you even got to tell it? Drop a yes or no in the comments right now, because Soren's night is about to flip everything you think you know about being chosen. The rumor about my scent has been circulating since I was 16. Someone, and I still do not know who started it, told a council elder that my scent profile was irregular, unstable, that alphas who got too close experienced disorientation. The elder mentioned it to 2 people. Those 2 people mentioned it to 12. By the time I attended my first ritual at 17, the story had evolved into something almost mythological. Soren Vale smells wrong. Soren Vale makes alphas sick. Soren Vale is unbondable. None of it is true. But truth requires someone willing to repeat it louder than the lie, and no one in my corner of this world has ever been that loud. Dax Mercer finds me at the 20-minute mark. He does not sit. He does not need to. He just stops in front of my section of the bench with 2 of his friends flanking him like decorative threats, and he looks at me the way someone looks at a stain they are deciding whether to clean or simply walk around. Still here, he says. Not a question. An observation dressed as an insult, which is his specialty. I do not answer. I look slightly past him, at the amber column behind his left shoulder, because I know from experience that eye contact gives him energy, and I am not interested in feeding what he is doing. He says something to the friend on his right, low enough that I cannot catch it. The friend laughs. The other one looks away like he almost feels something close to shame, but not quite enough to actually do anything. 3 more minutes. I tell myself that constantly at these things. Just survive 3 more minutes, then 3 more after that. Eventually, the ritual closes. Eventually, I go home. Eventually, this particular humiliation has an expiration. Then the doors open. Not the side doors, the main doors. the ones that have not moved all evening. And the room changes. I feel it before I see it. Every alpha in the hall reacts at the same moment, a collective tension that ripples from the entrance inward like something dropped into still water. Conversations stop mid-sentence. An elder near the front straightens involuntarily. Two pack representatives step back from the center of the room without appearing to realize they are doing it. The Ashmoor triplets were not on the attendance registry. Their territory sits in a jurisdiction that does not answer to the Halcyon Pack Council. They do not attend rituals. They do not ask permission. They do not explain themselves to anyone. They walk in like men who have never once considered the possibility that a room might not be ready for them. Riven Ashmoor leads. Dark coat, no expression, eyes that do not scan the room the way normal alphas do. He already knows what he is looking for. Stellan walks to his left, composed and unhurried, the kind of man who looks gentle until you notice that his calm never actually changes, not even slightly, which means it is not calm at all. Blaise comes last, and he is the one who makes the hair on my arms rise, because he looks like someone actively choosing restraint and finding it effortful. They do not slow down. They do not look at any other Omega in the row. They walk directly toward me. No hesitation. Then Riven stops 2 feet in front of where I am sitting, and in a voice low enough that only I and the people immediately around us can hear it clearly, he says, "Act like you're ours." My entire world stops, and before I can process a single word of that, Blaise leans close enough that I catch his scent, sharp and overwhelming, and he murmurs directly against the side of my head, "Don't look shocked. They're watching." Chapter 2. Controlled, Hyper-Aware. I stand up. I do not know why I stand up. My body moves before my brain has finished processing the sentence. One moment I am sitting on that bench with 500 people deciding my worth, and the next I am on my feet with Stellan Ashmoor's hand extended toward me like a door being held open. And I take it. I take it. The room reacts the way rooms react when something happens that was not supposed to. The sound does not get louder. It gets quieter first, a sharp drop into stunned silence, and then the murmur starts at the edges and works inward like a slow fire. I feel every single pair of eyes in the hall land on me simultaneously, and for the first time in 5 years of attending these rituals, I am not invisible. I focus on one thing. Do not look scared. Blaise's warning is still sitting in my ear. They're watching. I understand immediately what he means. This is not a private moment. Every reaction I have right now is being cataloged, interpreted, and filed by pack representatives, council elders, media affiliates, and 200 alphas who were not expecting tonight to go this direction. So I lift my chin. I let Stellan guide me forward. I match their pace. Dax Mercer moves to intercept before we reach the center floor. Of course he does. He positions himself at an angle that forces a confrontation without technically blocking the path, which is his signature. Technically defensible, functionally aggressive. He looks at Stellan first, because Stellan is the one who looks most approachable, which is the wrong instinct entirely. "The claim is irregular," Dax says. His voice is steady and loud enough to carry. He wants witnesses. A tri-claim in a Halcyon ritual requires pre-registered bond documentation and council clearance. None of that was filed. Watching this unfold with your pulse spiking. Stellan looks at him. Just looks, for about 3 full seconds. Then he says, pleasantly, "You are referencing the 2019 amendment to Article 7 of Halcyon Bond Law. That amendment was conditionally suspended under the Territorial Sovereignty Accord of 2021, which the Ashmoor House co-signed. You may verify that at your convenience. I recommend doing so quietly. The quiet menace of someone who has already won the argument. Dax opens his mouth, closes it, looks at the nearest council elder who gives him the smallest possible shake of the head. Not here. Not against them. He steps aside. I file that away. The triplets did not arrive unprepared. They knew exactly which challenges would come and what to say to each one. That level of readiness does not happen in real time. This was planned before tonight. The realization landing slowly. The question is, how long before tonight? They take me to the private Ashmoor wing on the building's northern end, a set of rooms I did not know existed until tonight. The hallways shift from ceremonial to functional as we move deeper in. Less decoration, more structure. Guards at intervals who acknowledge the triplets without being told to. I expect a conversation, questions, explanations, some kind of transactional negotiation where they tell me what they want and I decide how desperate I am. Instead, Riven shows me to a room. It is clean and quiet and smells like cedar and nothing else. There is food on the side table. There are medical-grade scent blockers in a small case by the window, which tells me someone anticipated I might need them after a high-stress public event. Standing in the center of the room, very still. And there is no lock on the inside of the door. The door can be locked. I check. The mechanism is there, but the bolt only engages from the outside. I stare at that detail for longer than I should. When Riven comes to check in 20 minutes later, I am ready. "What do you want from me?" I ask. No softening, no gratitude performance. He looks at me for a moment. Rest. That's not an answer. It's tonight's answer. I try Stellan next, in the hallway near the main sitting room. He is more generous with his words, which makes him harder to trust. "The claim protected you," he says. "That's the honest starting point." Protected me from what? Patient, almost gentle, which is somehow worse. From what was going to happen if we hadn't. And then Blaise, who I find standing near the exterior window like a man who wants very much to be somewhere else, but will not let himself leave. He is the most physically present of the three. Everything about him takes up more space than it seems like it should. "Don't leave the wing alone," he says, without looking at me. Why? Because I said so. That's not a reason. He finally looks at me then, and something behind his expression shifts in a way I cannot fully interpret. "No," he agrees, "it's not." None of them explain what I need protection from. None of them explain why the claim. None of them give me the one thing I actually need, which is the truth, and I have run out of ways to ask for it tonight. I lie down on the bed in the cedar room with no inside lock and stare at the ceiling. Through the wall, I hear staff moving, a low exchange of voices, the kind of half-conversation that stops itself just short of being audible. I catch 3 words clearly. Activated too early. I do not sleep after that. And then, just past 2 in the morning, when the wing is gone completely still, a voice comes through the wall in a low, deliberate tone. One of the triplets. I cannot tell which one. The words landing like cold water. If he remembers before the bond stabilizes, we lose him. Chapter 3. Alert. Watching everything. By the 3rd morning inside the Ashmoor estate, I have mapped every hallway I am allowed into. I do that. When I feel unsafe, I learn the geography. I count steps between rooms. I notice which doors close fully and which ones leave a half-inch gap. I track the guard rotation. 2 at the north corridor entrance, shift change at 6, and again at 6 in the evening. 1 stationed outside the archive hall on the east wing, who disappears for approximately 11 minutes during the dinner hour. I notice everything. I always have. People mistake silence for emptiness. It is not. The estate is not openly cruel. That almost makes it worse. The rooms are warm. The food is consistent and good. The triplets are never loud with me, never threatening in any way I could point to directly. But the control underneath all of it is so thorough that it starts to feel like a second skin I did not agree to wear. Guards who rotate without explanation. Doors that open from some sides and not others. The way Riven watches me from across a room with no expression at all, like I am a variable he has not finished calculating. Riven studies me like a problem. Stellan speaks to me like someone performing trust he has not decided to actually give yet. Blaise acts like a man fighting an instinct he does not fully understand and losing the fight incrementally. Observing this clearly, not flattered by any of it. When they are together, they are coordinated in a way that feels almost too seamless. When they are separate, something in each of them loosens in a different direction. I start seeking out those separate moments because alone, they are more honest. Not much, but enough. Outside the estate, Dax Mercer is making noise. I find out through a staff member who leaves a news feed open on a tablet near the kitchen corridor. The headline is 3 paragraphs of implication dressed as concern. Omega of disgraced Vale line allegedly coerces multi-claim from Ashmoor Kings. Council demands bond verification. A short, humorless exhale. Coerces. Right. Because the much more plausible explanation that 3 of the most politically powerful alphas on the continent walked into a mating ritual and singled out the most publicly dismissed Omega in the room for personal gain is apparently beyond consideration. The pressure from the Crown Council mounts fast. By the 4th day, 2 senior council representatives arrive at the estate gate requesting formal bond verification proceedings. Stellan handles them at the entrance and does not let them past the first corridor. I watch from the upper window. He smiles the entire time. That smile does not reach anything behind his eyes. The archive hall is off the east corridor, past the guard who disappears for 11 minutes. I wait. I count. On the 4th evening, I walk in. The hall is long and smells like paper and cedar oil and something older underneath both of those. Shelves that go up past where the lighting reaches clearly, wooden cases sealed with brass fittings, framed documents, a few portraits, the old kind, oil paint on dark canvas, hung in a row along the left wall. I look at them the way I look at everything in this estate, methodically, searching for information. Most of them are alphas, the Ashmoor line going back several generations, formal portraits, formal expressions, the weight of accumulated power visible in the posture of every subject. Then I find the one near the end. It is set slightly behind a carved wood panel, the kind of placement that is not quite hidden, but would require someone to look deliberately. I move the panel. The Omega in the portrait stares back at me. My first thought is that someone painted one of my relatives. My second thought, arriving less than a second later, is that the resemblance is too precise for coincidence. Not similar the way family members are similar, almost identical in structure. The jawline, the set of the eyes, the particular quality of stillness in the expression that I recognize because I have been told my face does the same thing. The portrait is old. The paint has darkened at the edges, and the style is at least a century behind anything contemporary. This Omega has been dead for generations. I lean in to read the plaque beneath the frame. It has been scratched, deliberately, thoroughly, with something sharp. Most of the engraving is gone beyond recovery. One word remains: convergence. I do not know what it means in this context, but the way it has been partially destroyed tells me that someone, at some point, decided it was safer removed than visible. I reach up and touch the edge of the frame. You were never supposed to see that yet. Riven is in the doorway. He is not angry. He is not surprised. He is looking at me with an expression I have not seen on him before. Something that sits between calculation and something rawer underneath it, and the combination stops me cold. Who is she? He does not answer immediately. Riven. I say his name directly for the first time. Who is the Omega in that portrait? He steps into the room. He looks at the portrait the way someone looks at something they have spent years deciding how to explain. And then he closes the archive hall door behind him. He tells me part of it. Just part. I will understand later that Riven always does this. Gives you enough truth to keep you from leaving, not enough to give you real ground to stand on. At the time, I take what he offers because it is the first honest thing anyone in this estate has said to me with the door closed. Not softening any of it. Generations back, there was a category of Omega the Pack histories stopped teaching. Conduits, they were called. Not because of anything they chose, but because of what they were born carrying. A rare bond structure, dormant in most carriers, that could anchor an unstable multi-alpha lineage. Not decoratively, functionally. The kind of anchor that kept fractured alpha bloodlines from tearing themselves apart through unchecked dominance conflict. They were valuable in the way that things become valuable when powerful people realize they can be used. Wars were fought over conduit lines, not to protect them, to control access to them. Eventually, the Crown Council of the time made a political decision that removing the conduit bloodlines from public record was cleaner than regulating them. The families were not killed outright in most cases. They were simply dismantled. Titles stripped, histories revised, names removed from registries until the lineages either died quietly or disappeared into ordinary life with no knowledge of what they carried. The Vale family was not disgraced. They were erased. My whole life, I believed my family lost standing because of weakness, a bad investment, a broken alliance, a series of failures I was too young to understand when they happened. The story I grew up with was that we had been ordinary people who overreached and paid for it. That story was constructed. Someone built it to keep me looking backward at shame instead of forward at the truth. Why are you telling me now? I ask. Because you found the portrait. You're telling me because I found the portrait, not because you decided I deserved to know. Riven looks at me. Yes. At least he doesn't dress it up. I ask the question that has been sitting in the back of my throat since the night of the ritual. Did you claim me at that ritual because you wanted me or because you needed what I am? The silence that follows is exactly the kind that answers the question without technically answering it. Blaise, who I did not realize had followed Riven to the archive hall, is standing near the window. He has been quiet this entire time. Now he moves, fast and without warning, and puts his fist through the stone column near the east shelf. Not near it, through it. The crack runs 18 inches up the surface. He does not explain. He turns away from both of us and stands with his back to the room. That reaction tells me more than a direct answer would have. I try to leave the estate that afternoon. Not impulsively. I think it through. I watch the guard rotation, identify the shift gap at the south gate, and time my approach. I have made it to the outer corridor before Blaise appears at the end of it like he materialized from the architecture. "Where are you going?" he asks. "Outside." Not alone. I wasn't asking. Neither was I. He walks me back in, not physically. He simply positions himself, and I understand that the alternative requires a confrontation I am not equipped for yet. But as we turn back toward the inner estate, two figures in dark gear drop from the south wall. Precise landing. Coordinated movement. They are not guards. They are after something specific. They are after me. Blaise moves so fast I barely process it. Stellan comes from the east corridor simultaneously, which tells me they were both tracking me before I even reached the gate. The fight is short and controlled, and I stay pressed against the inner wall watching people move around me like I am the fixed point in a coordinate system. When it is over, one of the attackers is restrained on the ground. Before Stellan pulls him up and takes him inside, the attacker looks at me with something that is not quite hatred. Something colder. The words landing wrong. "The crown's missing key," he says. Not an insult, a designation. Back inside, I sit in the cedar room and replay that phrase. The crown's missing key. Not the Ashmoor's asset, not a rival pack's target. The crown. Which means the people running the pack system from the top of it consider me something that belongs to them. And the triplets knew that before the ritual. Very still, thinking. Which means they went to the ritual knowing the crown wanted me. Which means they also knew the ritual would put me in open view. Which means the question is no longer whether they planned their arrival. The question is whether they planned the threat, too. In Stellan's study, the door left open after the controlled chaos of the afternoon, I see the corner of a sealed file on the desk. The kind of file that uses formal bond registry paper and a wax press seal. Crossing to it before I can stop myself. I turn it over. My full legal name is printed on the front in official ink. Below it, stamped in red, "Surveillance begins, age 7. Chapter 5. Voice flat, the kind of flat that comes after something breaks. I put the file on the table between us and I do not say anything. I let it sit there. All three of them are in the room. That is deliberate on my part. I waited until I could get all three of them in the same space because I am done having partial conversations with partial people who give me partial truth, one careful piece at a time. The file lands between us like a verdict. Stellan sees it first. His expression does not change, but his stillness shifts quality. It goes from composed to careful, which are not the same thing. Riven looks at the file, then at me. Blaise looks at the window. "How long?" I ask. "How long have you known who I am?" Stellan answers because of course he does. He is the one built for the difficult conversation, the one who has the right words ready at the right moment. Under different circumstances, I might respect that. "Years," he says, simply. No additional packaging. Years. I was 16 the first time I attended a ritual. I sat on that bench and no one came near me, and I told myself I was used to it, and I went home and ate cereal at midnight and decided I was fine. I was 17 when the rumor about my scent was so established that even new alphas arriving in the region already knew to stay back. I was 19 when my last remaining relative sold the family property and moved away, and I understood, finally, that I was fully alone. All of that time, someone was watching. The file starts at age 7, I say. I was a child. You were a conduit heir in an unmonitored environment, Riven says. The risk of crown detection increased every year. That is not an answer to what I asked. It is the only answer I have that is honest. Pause, the anger going somewhere cold. I look at him. Do you understand what it means to grow up believing you are unwanted? Not just unloved, actually defective. That something about you specifically is the problem, and if you could just fix it, people might finally stop looking through you? Riven does not answer. Because that was my life. And the whole time, you knew it was manufactured. You knew why no alpha ever reacted normally to me. You knew what my family actually was, and you let me believe I was broken. Blaise makes a sound, not a word, something that comes from further back in his throat. Stellan says quietly, I opposed involving you. I want you to know that. I argued against the ritual approach. But you came anyway. Yes. A silence that hurts. Blaise, I say, because he still has not looked at me directly. He turns. His expression is the most unguarded I have seen on any of their faces in 5 days. I wanted to take you somewhere safe before any of it, he says. Before the ritual. Just find you and take you somewhere they couldn't reach. Why didn't you? Because I wasn't sure you'd come. Pause, that landing strangely in my chest. We end up in the training courtyard, Blaise and I, because neither of us can hold still, and the room with the file in it has run out of breathable air. He doesn't train. I don't either. We just sit on opposite ends of a stone bench and exist in the same silence for a while, which is somehow the most honest thing that has happened between us. Did it ever feel like more than strategy? I ask. Any of it? From the beginning, he says. That was the problem. Inside, later, Stellan finds me near the east corridor and takes my hand without explanation. I have a shallow cut on my palm from catching myself against the wall during yesterday's attack, and he tends it with supplies from a kit he apparently just carries. He is methodical and precise, and says almost nothing the entire time. The gentleness is so careful it almost undoes me. Almost. That night, I pass Riven in the hallway outside my room. He has clearly been standing there, not doing anything, just standing. We look at each other. He does not explain. He walks away. I stand in the doorway and feel something in my chest pull in 3 directions simultaneously, a sensation I have no framework for, like a chord being struck on an instrument I didn't know I was carrying. It happens so fast, I almost convince myself I imagined it. A pull, from all 3 of them at once. Not gentle, not decorative, impossible. That kind of bond response requires a stabilized conduit link, and my seal is still intact. Everyone in this estate has confirmed that. No bond has been initiated. There is nothing to pull. Except I felt it. And I think they felt it too. I am still standing in the doorway at 5 in the morning when a courier arrives at the estate's main entrance. I hear the exchange from the upper corridor. Stellan's voice, formal and controlled. The sound of a sealed document being opened. Then nothing for a long time. Then his footsteps coming toward the stairs, slower than usual. He finds me at the top of the landing and holds up the document without preamble. It is a Crown Council summons. My name is printed at the top. The charge listed is Ancestral Audit and Bond Status Verification. At the bottom, in formal legal script, is a note I have to read 3 times before the meaning fully lands. No Omega who has undergone ancestral audit before the Crown Council has ever walked out of that proceeding with their bond status unchanged. Not one. Walking into it, pulse controlled, eyes open. Not one Omega has walked out of an ancestral audit with their bond status unchanged. Not one. I hold that fact in my chest the entire ride to the Crown Council chamber. Stellan sits across from me in the vehicle, hands folded, expression neutral. Riven reads documents he does not explain. Blaise sits beside me and says nothing, but his knee presses against mine the whole way, steady and constant, like a signal he cannot stop sending. Not leaning into it, not pulling away. The chamber is everything I expected and nothing I was prepared for. It is staged like a courtroom but decorated like a cathedral. High ceilings, dark stone columns, tiered seating for council members, legal witnesses, PAC representatives, and media affiliates with press credentials clipped to their jackets. The amber lighting is warm, but the room is cold. That combination is not accidental. Warm enough to look civil, cold enough to remind you that civility here is a costume. I am directed to a seat at the center of the floor, not a table, a chair, positioned so that every tiered row of observers has an unobstructed view of my face. Understanding immediately, I am not a witness in this room. I am the exhibit. The hearing opens with procedural language that sounds formal until you parse what it actually says. Bond status review, ancestral line confirmation, public record correction. Every phrase is careful. Every phrase is a legal wrapper around the same core objective. Discredit the Ashmoor claim, establish Crown jurisdiction, and strip me of any independent status before I understand enough to fight it. Dax Mercer is here. Of course he is. He sits in the observer row that allows him to face me directly, and he has dressed for this occasion the way someone dresses for a victory photograph. He is not testifying. He does not need to. His presence in that seat is the statement. Eyes forward, not giving him the satisfaction. The questioning starts formally and becomes something else within 4 minutes. The council elder leading the proceeding, a man named High Arbiter Caro, has the practiced cadence of someone who has run these hearings long enough to know exactly how much pressure to apply before the subject cracks. He asks about my scent history. I answer. He asks about my family's bond registry records. I answer. He asks why no alpha in 5 years of ritual attendance ever formally approached me. I answer. Very controlled, very deliberate. He asks if I believe the Ashmoor triplets acted voluntarily or if I used irregular scent chemistry to induce bond response. Pause, letting that sit. The room goes quieter than it already was. I say clearly, no. Caro writes something, does not look up. The council notes the Omega's denial. Notes the denial, as if my answer is a data point to be filed, not a truth to be considered. Across the room, I watch Riven's jaw tighten by approximately 2 millimeters. That is the Riven version of fury. He rises and begins dismantling Caro's legal framework from the ground up. He cites 3 precedents I have never heard of and quotes PAC law article numbers from memory without looking at a single document. Every challenge Caro attempts bounces back with a counter-reference that leaves the arbiter's legal team visibly recalculating. Stellan intercepts a council representative trying to enter testimony from a paid witness and publicly cross-references that witness's prior council stipend payments. The representative sits down. Blaise does not speak. He watches Dax Mercer with an attention so focused and so completely still that Dax shifts in his seat twice in 10 minutes without appearing to understand why. Watching all of this from the center chair, not moving. Then Dax stands and addresses the chamber without being called. The Omega's irregular bond chemistry presents a risk to pack stability, he says. Until verified and contained, the most responsible course of action is supervised study. The Council has appropriate facilities. The word landing like something dropped from a height. Supervised study. Blaise is on his feet before Dax finishes the sentence. Stellan puts one hand on his arm without looking at him. Blaise stays standing but does not move forward. The effort that costs him is visible from across the room. Blood cold, staying still in the chair. I look at Dax directly. He looks back. And I understand something in that moment that reorders everything I thought I knew about him. He is not threatened by me. He never was. He is doing a job. Someone above him decided the outcome of this hearing before it began, and Dax is the public face they chose because he is already positioned as a tradition defender, and tradition defenders are useful when you want systemic cruelty to sound like common sense. Then, Caro produces a sealed document. He opens it with the kind of deliberate slowness that tells you the contents have already been shared with everyone in this room except you. It is a DNA ancestral record. My name. My bloodline trace. Confirmed Vale descent, intact and unbroken, extending back to the original conduit registry. I watch the room change. The hostility does not disappear. It upgrades. A moment ago, I was an irregular Omega making a questionable claim. Now, I am something with documented rare blood, and rare blood in this room does not mean freedom. It means everyone in a position of power just got a reason to want me controlled. A horror of it fully arriving. I was more protected when they thought I was worthless. Caro straightens his papers, looks at the chamber, then at me. By blood right, the Omega belongs not to the Ashmoor house, but to the crown. The words hit the room like a physical event. I hear them land in the silence, and I sit perfectly still while everything around me recalculates what I am worth and to whom. And the worst part is that no one in this chamber looks surprised. Moving fast, they do not wait for formal paperwork. Riven has my arm before the arbiter's sentence finishes echoing off the stone ceiling. Not rough, not a drag. A grip that says, we are leaving now, and the conversation about whether I agree with that decision will happen later and somewhere else. Stellan is already at the chamber's side exit, speaking in rapid, quiet tones to someone on a secured line. Blaise falls in behind me, and I feel him close off the space at my back the way a door closes, solid and final. We are outside the building in under 4 minutes. The vehicle is already running. The city moving past the windows. This is not a clean exit. I understand that immediately. The council chamber had media affiliates inside it. The ruling was public. The moment we moved, every person in that room with a communication device started transmitting. And that means the Crown's enforcement units have a timeline and a direction. Riven makes 3 calls in the first 10 minutes. Short, no names, coordinates and confirmation codes. Whatever system he is operating inside of, it was built before tonight. Where are we going? I ask. North, Stellan says. That's not specific. Not yet. Looking between them, reading the tension underneath the control. I watch Blaise. He is looking out the rear window at regular intervals, tracking something I cannot see. His hands are flat on his thighs. That is the posture of a man actively restraining his own instincts, and it tells me the situation outside this vehicle is worse than the posture inside it suggests. We drive for 4 hours. The city drops away, then the suburbs, then anything I recognize. The road climbs and the landscape changes to something older and less managed, dense tree lines and stone formations and no visible infrastructure. The stronghold is built into the mountain. Stepping out and looking up at it, not decorated into it, built from it. The walls are the same stone as the cliff face behind them, and the structure goes back further than the exterior suggests. It smells like cold air and old timber and something mineral underneath both. The kind of place that has been here long enough to stop caring about being impressive. Inside, stripped of every social performance the estate required, the truth between us has nowhere left to hide. And that is terrifying in a completely different way. I round on all 3 of them the moment the main door closes. You defied a crown ruling, I say, in public, on record. Yes, Riven says. That is not a small thing. No. My voice going up despite myself. They can call that an act of territorial aggression. They can escalate this to open conflict between the Ashmoor House and the Crown Council. Do you understand what I'm saying? You escalated my life into a potential war without asking me if that was a choice I wanted made. Riven looks at me steadily. There was never going to be a version of tonight where the outcome was peaceful. The ruling was written before we walked in. You don't know that. I do, he says, because I've read the Crown's internal protocols on conduit recovery procedures. That hearing was not a legal proceeding. It was a transfer document with an audience. Stellan steps forward. We hoped to buy time. That was the honest goal. More time to build a counter case, to find documentation that could challenge the ancestral audit results. We ran out of it faster than projected. Faster than projected, I repeat. My life. Projected. Blaise does not offer an explanation. He says, I would burn the entire system down before I handed you over to them. That should sound like protection. It sounds like a warning about what he is capable of, and I do not know how to hold both of those things at once. I step away from all 3 of them and stand near the north window. The mountain outside is dark and enormous and completely indifferent to everything happening inside this room. I am furious. I have the right to that fury, and I also know, somewhere I am not ready to say aloud, that if they had not moved when they did, I would currently be in a Crown facility being processed like a recovered artifact. That night, the bond starts doing something new. It does not announce itself. It arrives the way pressure arrives before a storm, a shift in the air that you register before you have language for it. I am lying on a cot in the room they gave me, staring at the ceiling beams, when I feel Blaise's exhaustion like it is sitting in my own chest. Not imagined, not projection. The weight of it lands with a specificity that could not come from anywhere but him. Then Stellan's tension, sharp and controlled, running along the inside of my forearms. Then Riven's focus, cold and layered, behind my eyes like a second thought I did not generate. I press my hands to the sides of my head, because having 3 other people's emotional states running through your nervous system simultaneously is not something the human body is designed to process quietly. I see fragments, not memories, not dreams, something older. A ritual space with water on 3 sides, voices in a language I do not know but understand. A figure in a dark robe pressing a seal, small and burning and specific, onto the chest of an infant who does not cry, because something in the infant already knows. I wake up on the floor. I do not remember going down. The room is still dark. The stronghold is still. But something in my body has shifted forward about 3 inches, like a lock that has been partially turned without the key. I sit up. I say the word before I understand where it came from. Marrow. Down the hall, through 2 closed doors, all 3 alphas go completely silent at the same moment. Chapter 8. The word still in the air. No one moves for a full 10 seconds. Then Riven's door opens. Then Stellan's. Then Blaise comes from the far end of the corridor, and all 3 of them are in my doorway at the same time, looking at me with an expression I have never seen on any of their faces before. Not alarm. Recognition. They knew that word. They knew it immediately, and the fact that it came out of my mouth told them something specific, something they were measuring against a timeline in their heads. "Sit down," Riven says. And for once, his voice has something underneath the evenness. "I'm already on the floor," I say. He sits down too, on the floor, across from me. Riven Ashmoor, who has not sat in a position of informal equivalence with anyone since I have known him, folds himself down onto the cold stone floor of this mountain stronghold and looks at me level. That gesture doing more than any explanation he has offered so far. Stellan takes the chair near the window. Blaise leans against the doorframe with his arms crossed and his jaw set, the look of a man who has been dreading this conversation and is determined to get through it without flinching. Project Marrow. Letting Riven talk, taking it in. It was not a small program. It was a decade-long Crown initiative to identify, locate, and selectively reactivate dormant conduit bloodlines, not for preservation, not for protection, for integration into Crown-aligned alpha houses as stabilizing political tools, living instruments. The language in the recovered documents, which the Ashmoors have held fragments of for years, uses the word assets consistently, never people. My family's destruction was not a consequence of the program. It was a feature of it. The Vale line resisted. Exactly how is still partially unclear, but what is documented is that 3 senior Vale family members formally refused a Crown bonding directive, and within 18 months, every form of public standing the family held had been systematically removed. No trial, no formal disgrace proceeding, just a slow administrative erasure that left my parents with no resources, no allies, and no explanation that would make sense to an outside observer. By the time I was born, the work was done. My parents raised me in a story where we had simply failed. That story kept me from asking the right questions for 23 years. The weight of that settling. The seal placed on me at age 7 was not a bond marker. It was a suppression seal. Placed during what my family was told was a routine bloodline health screening. It buried the conduit signal deep enough that standard alpha scent response could not detect it. That is why no alpha ever reacted normally to me at the rituals. Not because I was defective, because I had been deliberately made unreadable. A long beat, something cracking open in your chest. The mating ritual did not create anything new. When Riven said, "Act like you're ours," and the triplets surrounded me in that hall, the scent contact at close range from 3 aligned alpha signatures disrupted the outer layer of the seal. Not broke it, disrupted it. Enough that the bond recognition started activating beneath the surface. That is what activated too early meant. That is what the voice through the wall meant by losing me before the bond stabilized. Looking at Riven. "You knew," I say. You knew the ritual would trigger recognition if I was a conduit. We suspected, Stellan says. You attended to confirm it. A yes, Riven says, not looking away from him. So your arrival that night? The claim? All of it was to get close enough to test whether I was what you thought I was? Yes. The word is clean and undecorated, and it lands harder because of that. Blaise pushes off the doorframe. We didn't plan what happened after, what we felt after. But you planned the approach. Yes. Sitting with that. I want to be purely furious. I reach for it. The anger is there, real and justified, because they made a decision about my life before I had any information to make one about theirs. They used the ritual. They used the moment. They walked into that hall knowing what they were looking for and used my public humiliation as cover for a confirmation test. That is a line, crossed deliberately. And yet, very quietly, if they had not crossed it, I would be in a Crown facility right now, catalogued, processed, assigned. I ask the question that has been underneath every other question since the archive hall. If you had been wrong about me, if I wasn't a conduit, if I was just an ordinary Omega from a disgraced bloodline with an irregular scent, would you still have chosen me? The silence that follows is enormous. Blaise opens his mouth. Riven looks at his hands. Stellan turns toward the window. None of them answer before the stronghold's alarm system activates across every wall simultaneously, a sound like the mountain itself issuing a warning. And then the first impact hits the outer fortification hard enough to shake the floor under all of us. On your feet instantly, the question still unanswered, and now suspended in the air between four people who may not survive the next hour. The Crown did not wait for morning. Running, the stone floor shaking beneath every step. The second impact hits before we clear the inner corridor. Dust drops from the ceiling in thin lines. A support beam at the east junction cracks audibly. Blaise is already ahead, moving toward the armory access with the focused efficiency of a man who prepared for this possibility before he unpacked anything else. Staying close, staying moving. How many? Riven asks into his comm unit. The answer comes back in numbers I do not fully catch, but Riven's face tells me it is not a small reconnaissance team. It is a coordinated assault force, and they brought enough to make sure the Ashmoor name does not function as a deterrent tonight. Stellan pulls me into the operations room off the main corridor. Maps, comm units, a wall display showing thermal signatures moving along the stronghold's outer perimeter in organized formation. You stay in the inner structure, he says. No. He looks at me. I am done being the thing everyone else makes decisions around, I say. Tell me what I can do. Actually, tell me. A beat, reading me. He tells me. There are 24 civilian staff in the lower wing. Someone needs to move them through the underground passage to the secondary structure 300 meters north. The passage requires someone who knows the interior layout and can stay calm when the walls are shaking. Stellan cannot leave the operations room. Riven is already running counter-strategy from the eastern fortification. Blaise is outside. I take the passage route. Moving through it, the sounds of the assault muffled but constant overhead. I get 17 people through before the passage entrance takes a structural hit and the ceiling drops 4 inches on the western end. I get the remaining 9 through by feel and by counting steps in the dark. By the time I come back up through the secondary structure's interior stairwell, the battle above has changed shape. Blaise is in the outer yard. I see him through the reinforced window, and what I see redefines the word unrestrained. He moves through Crown enforcement like he is solving a physics problem, fast and without hesitation, each decision feeding directly into the next. There is nothing performed about it. This is what he actually is when the social architecture comes down. Watching him, something shifting in my chest. Riven controls the terrain from the east rampart. He has set conditions on the field before the Crown's units realized they were operating inside someone else's framework. 3 positions they moved toward were already unusable. 2 routes they tried to use collapsed under preset countermeasures. He is not reacting to the assault. He anticipated its shape and built obstacles into the geography before it arrived. Stellan coordinates everything else. Evacuations, communications, counter-narrative transmissions going out simultaneously to every allied pack frequency, documenting the Crown's assault on a sovereign territorial structure in real time. The Crown wanted this quiet. Stellan is making it the loudest thing happening on the continent tonight. Moving back into the inner structure, the plan forming. Then Dax finds me in the interior corridor. He is not in enforcement gear. He came in with the Crown's forces, but he is not one of them, and he positions himself between me and the nearest exit with the ease of someone who has thought about this specific moment. Going still, reading him. "You don't have to make this harder than it needs to be," he says. "You allied with the Crown," I say, "for political advancement, for survival." He says it without shame. "The same thing you've been doing your whole life." That landing wrong because it's not entirely inaccurate. "I know what you are, Soren," he continues. "I've known for 2 years. The rumors about your scent? I didn't start them, but I knew why they existed. Adults with council ties planted them when you were 16 to keep any unauthorized alpha from bonding you before the Crown could position you correctly." The floor shifting underneath me without moving. I was not untouched because I was wrong. I was untouched because I was guarded. Not protected. Guarded. Like an object in a vault kept out of circulation until the right buyer was ready. Every ritual. Every empty bench. Every night I sat with cereal at midnight telling myself I was fine. Something in me breaks open. That revelation does something to the seal. I do not plan it. I do not understand it until it is already happening. The grief and the rage and the full weight of 23 years of a constructed isolation hits the suppression seal like a structural force, and the seal, already disrupted, already cracked at the edges from weeks of proximity to 3 aligned alpha signatures, does not hold. The moment it gives way, it does not feel like freedom. It feels like every door in a building blowing open simultaneously. The conduit bond activates fully, and it is not quiet, and it is not decorative, and it is nothing like what I imagined a bond would feel. It is sovereign. It runs outward from my chest in every direction and finds Riven on the east rampart, and Stellan in the operations room, and Blaise in the outer yard. And it links to all 3 of them at once with a force that stops all 4 of us at the same moment. Across the battlefield, the Crown's scent command protocols, the chemical signals they use to keep their enforcement units in coordinated aggression, fracture. The units lose cohesion. The formation breaks. I feel it happen the way you feel a cord snap under tension. And then, every person in that yard goes to their knees. Not to the Crown, not to the Ashmoor triplets. To me. Dax takes one step back. His composure, The only thing he arrived here with goes somewhere I cannot follow. I look past him, through the exterior doorway, at the yard full of kneeling men. I do not know what I just did. I do not know what it costs. I do not know what it means for every plan, every person in this conflict has been running. Then the High Chancellor steps through the outer gate. He is not in battle gear. He is dressed formally, as if this is still a proceeding, as if the smoking yard and the kneeling enforcement units are simply the next room in a hearing that never ended. He looks at me with the calm of a man who has been waiting for this specific moment for a very long time. Now he's awake. He says, "Begin phase 2. Standing in the wreckage and walks back through the gate. No one stops him. Not because we cannot, because the 11 words he just said rearranged the entire board, and every person in this yard is processing what it means that the Crown was not trying to stop tonight. They were waiting for tonight. The assault, the ruling, the pressure campaign, the hearing, all of it was not an attempt to contain me. It was a sequence designed to push me to the point of full activation. They needed the seal broken. They needed the bond open, and they needed it to happen outside Crown custody so that when it did, they had documentation of a sovereign conduit bond event occurring in uncontrolled conditions, which gives them legal grounds under pack law to classify me as an active territorial risk. Because did not lose tonight. They completed a phase. The days that follow are not clean. I want to tell you they are. I want to say that exposure equals justice, and that the truth coming out is the same as the system coming down. It is not. Systems do not collapse in a week. They absorb damage and reconfigure and find new language for the same structures. What happens is slower and more complicated and requires people willing to keep pushing long after the dramatic moment has passed. Dax Mercer's cooperation with the Crown becomes public through documentation Stellan releases to every allied pack frequency simultaneously. The evidence is specific, time-stamped, and sourced from Crown internal files recovered during the assault. His political positioning collapses within 72 hours. Not because the public is outraged on my behalf, because he bet on a winning side, and the side lost this round, and political allies are practical about those calculations. The Crown Council does not fall, but 3 senior members resign under pressure from allied territories who were watching the transmission Stellan ran during the battle. The High Chancellor retreats into procedural language and denies direct involvement in Project Marrow. The file with my name on it, surveillance begins age 7, is on record with 11 independent pack legal bodies. He can deny all he wants. I find the triplets in the Stronghold's main room on the 4th morning. I came down early on purpose. I want to do this before the day builds structure around it, setting the terms before they can arrange the conversation. I need you to answer something honestly, not strategically, not with the version of the truth you decided I was ready for. All 3 of them are still. Riven sets down his coffee. Stellan turns from the window. Blaise looks at me with an expression that is fully unguarded, in a way I have only seen twice before. Did you claim me at that ritual because of what I was, I say, or because of who I was? Pause, the question sitting. Riven speaks first. It began as calculation, he says. I will not insult you by saying otherwise. We identified you as a probable conduit. We assessed the Crown's timeline. We determined the ritual was the optimal intervention point. That is what I went there to do. Nodding, absorbing that. And after? He is quiet for a moment. After, he says, you stood up and took Stellan's hand knowing you had no reason to trust any of us. You lifted your chin in front of 500 people and you performed a calm you were not feeling, and I watched you do it. And something in my calculation became something else entirely. I do not have a cleaner answer than that. Turning to Stellan. I opposed the approach, Stellan says. You already know that. I thought it was wrong to use the ritual, wrong to use your isolation as a staging point. I was outvoted. And then I met you. And I understood immediately why Blaise could not stop talking about you in the months before. And I spent 3 weeks being angry at myself for understanding it. Blaise does not give a speech. He says, the moment you took my hand in that hall, I was done. That's the whole answer. Standing with all of that. I do not forgive them in that moment. I want to be clear about that. Forgiveness is not a switch. It is a direction. What I do in that room is decide on the direction and acknowledge we have a long way to travel before we arrive. But I set the terms. No more decisions made about my life before I have the information to make them myself. No more sealed files, surveillance protocols, or protective lies that keep me manageable. No bond formalized under any structure that treats me as something to be stabilized rather than someone to be known. If they want me beside them, it will not be as a conduit asset or a prophecy completion or a prize the crown failed to collect. It will be because they learn what it means to love someone they cannot own. They agree. Not with declarations, with something quieter and more difficult than declarations. Stellan dismantles a monitoring protocol I did not know was still running on my comm unit. Riven gives me access to every file related to Project Marrow without conditions. Blaise asks me for the first time what I actually want, not what I need to survive, what I want. The public believes the immediate threat has passed. That is not wrong, exactly. It is just incomplete. Because on the 8th day, Riven surfaces a document from the recovered Project Marrow files that none of them had reached yet. A secondary registry. A continuation protocol. Soren Vale was not the only surviving conduit descendant. The program identified 2. The second subject was not left in ordinary life to be found later. The second subject was located early, removed from family circumstances, and raised inside Crown infrastructure with full knowledge of what they were and what they were being prepared for. Unlike me, the second subject was not hidden from their own nature. They were trained into it. The file ends with a single status line updated 3 weeks ago. Subject 2 has already bonded. The Crown was never building one key. They were building a door. And then somewhere out there, that door is already open. If this story moved you, shook you, or made you feel something real, then you are exactly who this channel was built for. Every story here carries something true inside the fiction. Something about identity, about systems that decide your worth before you get a say, and about what it actually costs to choose yourself anyway. Subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Because Subject 2's story is coming to this channel, and it is going to hit differently. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about surviving being underestimated. And drop in the comments, do you think Soren should fully trust the triplets? Or does trust have to be rebuilt one day at a time? Tell me your thoughts. Your perspective matters here, and this community is built on people who are not afraid to feel deeply and think hard. Stay inspired. Stay curious. And I will see you In the next story.